What's up, y'all? We're about to get going. I'm super stoked because I keep letting Dylan host awesome streams, and Patrick Lassiter has been hosting streams. And so, I'm here every couple of weeks, and I love going over stuff. And Revolution tonight is going to be super dope. So, before we get going, in the chat, give me a 1 through 5 of how you're feeling in this moment right now. We're getting close to D-Day. We're not that far away. It's like within 80 days. I know Freemanpedia started his under 80 days blog, and the days up until. All right, so it looks like you guys are, not doing so bad. Definitely see a lot of 3s and 4s, which is good. It's a good place to be. It looks like some of you guys are, still within period 5, about to finish within the next few weeks. This is definitely a really, really good time to start reviewing for the exam. We're still several weeks out. You're still before spring break. You're not in like rush cram season yet. You've got some time. And so I highly, highly recommend starting to review, whatever that means for you, so you can start looking through some period 1 notes, start looking back at period 1 exams that you took, watching period 1 videos. There's some on YouTube, of course. You can also go back and rewatch our replays if you have Fiveable Plus. And so if you kind of pace it out and you're trying to review everything, it fits nicely from now until the end, So super recommend that. Some other things, let's see. Awesome. So you looked at my period 1 video today. Sweet. So for some of you guys, if it's your first time here, the chat is for you. You guys talk to each other. You can talk to me, of course. I can see the chat, but sometimes I'm going to be explaining things, and I won't see your chats pop up, especially because there's a lot of you guys in here. So if you have a question that you really want me to answer at any point, make sure that you click Ask a Question and that you list it there. Okay, and so I'll make sure to go through that parking lot throughout the night. I'll do most of them at the end and make sure to mark down, I'll timestamp the video. And so if you're accessing the replays later, you can just jump quickly to the parts of the video that you want. Also, if you're already a Fiveable Plus member, this was requested a couple weeks ago, but this is possible tonight. I just put the slides that I'm going to use tonight up in Fiveable Plus, so you can log in and access them so you can follow along with me. So that's something that was requested a few weeks ago, and that is now up for you. Okay, so, and also just to quickly shout this out too, if you're not yet deep into period 5 and you're feeling stressed out because other people are within it, you're fine, okay? You're not in a bad spot because you're right. There's still plenty of time, okay? So don't panic if you're it's still in period 4. The teachers pace this a lot differently, and you can always catch up, in your own ways, in independent ways, with reviews. So there's plenty of ways to do that. You're still fine. There is still plenty of time, but we're going to cover the revolutions tonight. Some of this is honestly review for you anyways, because you've taken an American history class before. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the American Revolution, but the other pieces of it will be important for what we do. And actually, I'm going to do some of it is going to be a little bit more interactive. So you guys will help me fill out one of the slides too. Just wanted to correct one thing. So Fiveable Plus is the discount that we've been giving for it in February is now decreased a bit. So it is $25 for Fiveable Plus for every single replay, every subject, every cram session that we'll do, every slide, everything's included. So everything for the whole year. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Yeah, get that promo. Sharing. All right, and like I said, you can access these slides if you log in, and they'll be posted after the stream. The one slide we're going to do together, that one will go up after. Okay, so you can see these at any point now when you're logged in. All right, so let's Let's do this. Learning revolutions. And by the way, shameless plug, follow us on social media, you guys. We're posting stuff all the time. Sometimes we give away Fiveable Plus to people. You know, we're doing all kinds of stuff, trying to make you laugh, trying to make this less stressful. So take a minute, follow us on Instagram. We will follow you back. Or you can even put your Instagram in the chat and we'll go and follow you. Same with Twitter. We'll follow you back. All right, so super shameless plug, but of course I'm going to drop those things. So let's just take a second and ground ourselves, okay? So period 5 is 4 key concepts, and they're really related, right? So you get this like flow in period 5 that, I don't know, I don't think we've seen since like period 2. Like period 2, the way that it's organized just like is so nice and it just kind of makes sense. And then 3 and 4, everything just kind of becomes regional and a lot more confusing to keep track of. But period 5 is awesome because of the way that it is literally just a list of like causes and effects, right? Like that's kind of how this whole thing runs. So 3 weeks ago, we talked about industrialization, what that looked like, how it started, how it spread, all the effects. And then the next week, Mr. Lassiter took us through imperialism, which was, you know, a result of industrializations. So, you know, once you get the mechanization of all this production, now there's a need for more markets and more raw materials. And so then the next key concept here is revolutions. And honestly, like a lot of this is happening at the same time. It's not a clear like this and then this and then this, but it is related to each other in terms of being an effect, right? So all the revolutions we're going to talk about tonight are very much like continuations of what's going on, right? You have, and we'll get into this in a second, but because of industrialization, because of imperialism, because of several other factors that were even before this time period, revolutions right now make sense. And then, oh, look, I have this 5.2 number twice. So, and then we have next week, Lassiter will be back to talk about long distance migrations, which again is just another effect of all of these things, right? We have people moving around for jobs because the economy has changed as a result of industrialization. You have people moving around because of imperialism, and you have people moving around because of revolutions. And so all of that we'll talk about next Monday. And if you haven't yet registered for that session, you totally should. These sessions are getting more and more crowded as more people show up. The link should be next to the chat, so you can see that. And just click long distance migrations, and you can register for that. Okay, all right. So doing a little bit of a throwback to 3 weeks ago when we talked about industrialization. Now, industrialization is not, you know, a clear like cause of these revolutions, but I just want to like set the stage, the context, if you will, right? So as you're writing LEQs, as you're writing DBQs, you've got to start with that context anyways. You got to talk about what's going on, what's the world like. And in this case, there's a lot of pieces you can talk about. But I'm going to set the stage with industrialization because I think this helps to understand what it would have been like to just like be a person in this time, right? With the rise of machine-produced things, this totally changes how people live, what family life is like, how we thought about women and how women thought about themselves, what cities looked like, right? Even just like the rise of mass culture, like the idea that we can communicate in a global scale, in a regional scale, that we can all be on the same page, that news is going to travel a lot faster, you know, the whole sense of these like extreme wealth, right? This class inequality, all of this is part of it. This is really setting the stage. This is exactly like, this is part of your context, you know? The Enlightenment is not happening in some vacuum. It's happening in this world, right? This is the world that these Enlightenment philosophers are are living in. And there's other factors that are influencing them. Like some of them come a little earlier, right? Some of them come before industrialization is really widespread. So those ones are sort of influenced by, the Renaissance and humanism, by the scientific revolution, by other like religious wars that were going on at the time. But then these revolutions are very much part of this world, right? So just keep that in mind. Like context, I know tends to be difficult, but if you start right now, every time you learn something, every time you read a new chapter, ask yourself, what just happened, right? Like what just went on right before I'm about to learn about the Russian Revolution? What happened before that in Russia, right? Or if you're going to talk about like what's the next chapter you have to read? Tell me in the chat. What is the next chapter that you're going to read in your textbook, and you're totally going to read it cover to cover. You're going to read the whole thing, every word, right? You're not going to like skim it. You're not going to skip the reading, right? All right, don't tell me chapter. I don't know what chapter. I don't memorize the chapter. So like, all right, Industrial Revolution, Road to Civil War in APUSH, what else we got? Imperialism, Russia. Okay, so whatever it is that you're reading, ask yourself what just happened. That's going to really help you get into the mindset of how do I tackle contextualization and make sure I know this, right? After one paragraph, I forget everything. Well, you got to find ways to like remember it, right? Like write it down in different ways, use colors. I have some videos on how to take notes too. They're also up in Fiveable Plus. Those are really useful. And we'll talk more about skills later. So, all right. So you've got these Enlightenment thinkers, and they're like I said, some of these guys are before industrialization, but they're part of the same upheaval of thinking, right? So in the world before them, things may have like felt like they had to go a certain way, right? That you had a monarch, that you had religion as very influential in society, that you had a patriarchy, that you didn't necessarily have rights if you were of a lower class. So instead, these are just four that I've pulled out. These tend to be the ones that kind of come up the most. And let's see, do we have to know these names for the AP World History test? Like yes and no, which is not the best way to answer that question. But they're not going to just straight up ask you about one of them, but they are going to. They're part of it. These are kind of the big four, right? So if you can just know. And I basically put in blue exactly like a quick thing to know about them. It's useful, and you can use them as evidence points. Okay, so you've got Montesquieu, he's the one that's thinking about checks and balances. That rather than there be one strong government that is run by a monarchy, instead you split up the different branches of government, and then they can check each other so that not one branch has too much power. Totally revolutionary idea, right? Like something that we now are obviously very accustomed to. We've got three branches of government, and they're supposed to check each other and make sure that, we don't fall into a monarchy like in the past. Then you've got someone like Voltaire. Voltaire is a lot more about religious liberties. It's like separation of church and state, which, was a thing before, but like really putting that into your government, writing that into a constitution, brand new. Rousseau would be social contract. This is like, you give up some rights to your government in exchange for protection, right? So it's like, the government can limit some things I do because it's trying to protect the whole, right? For this to continue. I'll pay taxes. I won't harm other people, things like that. And then you've got John Locke, who's life, liberty, and pursuit of property, which sounds familiar, right? So these are the natural rights. They influence the Bill of Rights. And all of these guys are incredibly influential for so Locke kind of like starts the social contract. Rousseau is the one that like writes the social contract. And he tends to be connected with that a bit more. So all of these guys are really important in really influencing how the leaders of the revolutions that we're about to talk about, they're the ones who are questioning, you know, like what they're living in. Is this the best form of government? Is this the best way for society to run? And if not, what does a better version look like? Right? Asking those questions are really big. You have to like think, you got to think big, you got to be imaginative, you know, and it takes a lot to push back on the norm and to say, this is not the best we could do. We could do better. So I would know these. I would know a few of them, you know, and just a quick way to remember them, because you can drop these into LEQs and get a whole bunch of evidence points that are, you know, if you get asked about something like this. Enlightenment could be woven into a whole lot of different topics. All right, so we're going to go through American, French, Haitian, and Latin American revolutions, and just kind of like really, you know, high level focus on what were the causes, who were the major players, and like what were the major events, and what were the impacts of it. And, you know, you guys drop things into the chat if you know more things about any of these revolutions. You know, drop some fun facts in. Tell us about them. We can teach each other here, okay? All right, so let's talk about causes of the American Revolution. Like, I said before, most students study the American Revolution in middle school. I'm sure it comes up in elementary school. You know, like your AP World students taking the exam in the United States, unless some of you are not in the United States, which is cool. I'd love to know how your school operates. But this gets taught a bunch of times. So causes of the American Revolution are, you know, unfair taxation. After the French and Indian War, the British really hike up the taxes because they're in debt, and the Americans are not super pumped about that because they don't have any representation. Something to keep in mind here, and this is like super important because I graded for the AP World exam a couple years ago, and I read like 1,200 essays in one week, and I can't tell you how many students got this point wrong. All right, so if you're taking notes and you're going to write something down, this is a good thing to write down. The American Revolution did not start because we wanted independence. Okay, so I'm going to try to rephrase that. At the beginning of the American Revolution, the goal was not independence. Unlike some of these other revolutions we're going to talk about. This is a difference, right? The American colonists did not set out for independence. In fact, they really, at the beginning, you know, it wasn't like at the, by the end, you know, there's obviously a tipping point when, yes, independence was necessary. But at the beginning, that wasn't the goal. Things were, you know, good enough. It just needed to get a little bit better, right? They wanted to just sort of renegotiate. But they didn't necessarily want independence. They just wanted more representation. Let me answer this. Okay, so remember, if you have questions that you want me to answer, put them in ask a question. So Morgan, I just moved yours over so I can answer that. Okay, so does the American Revolution include the elite classes? Yes. So this is also a difference. In the American Revolution, it's mostly the elite classes who are leading the revolution. Whereas in other revolutions, it's oftentimes the lower classes, right? Like France. Okay. Oops, I keep like opening my the same window. All right, so some major events, you got the Boston Tea Party, right? It's a form of protest, right? We're protesting the taxes on tea, and so we're going to dress as Native Americans because apparently that is allowed, and throw tea into the harbor. You've got Continental Congress. We're writing and the Declaration of Independence. You know, this is the point when obviously now they want their independence. But at the beginning, that's not how it started. That wasn't the goal. Okay, and then of course you have the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. which are revolutionary in this time. You don't have constitutions in the same way that it's written in the United States. You don't have a Bill of Rights. Nobody like wrote down those rights in this fashion. And so that's why we talk about the American Revolution first in this session, because it really does influence all the others. So major players, King George III is in, Europe, in Britain, kind of puppeteering the whole thing. T-Pain, right? Thomas Paine, he's the one who writes Common Sense, the pamphlet that really gets everyone all riled up. It's like, the tweet heard around the world, basically. Thomas Jefferson, of course, who becomes a president of the U.S., who writes the Declaration of Independence, George Washington, the first president, all the, these guys, right? So these are your major players. And what is the impact of this? Pretty much two things that really come out of it. One is obviously independence, right? America, independent now, doesn't have to worry about Britain. But the second big one is this idea of federal democracy, right? So it's not like a pure democracy in like a Greek sense, where you have everyone like very much participating. We are a representative democracy, so we elect our representatives. They go and vote for us in DC, and we have a federal government, right? So it's not, we have a big government, we have state governments. It's bureaucratic. The whole way that this country is set up, is designed, was incredibly revolutionary for this time. And obviously, America's gone through so many like different. So many conflicts in even reorganizing the way it's set up, because it wasn't necessarily good for all people. It was designed by the elites after all. So who's excluded from all those discussions? Native Americans, Black Americans, any other American that's not white. Women are excluded, lower class is excluded. So not everybody's part of the process. So it takes a long time, and I don't think we're even still there in smoothing it out. All right, any questions about, sounds like the Berlin Conference. It is kind of similar, huh? I guess that happens. All right, so let's see. The tea has been thrown. Oh, here we go. Can someone define bureaucracy? Yes. Ashley, great question. I don't know. I just love defining bureaucracy. I feel like I've done it in so many different, I feel like I've done it in so many different sessions. Okay, so here's how you need to think about a bureaucracy. Think about like a dresser, right? Like a bureau that has a bunch of drawers in it, like what you'd keep your clothes in, or, other items, whatever. And think about how you would organize that, right? You would put different things in each drawer. You've got, shirts in here, pants in here, whatever. A bureaucracy is basically the same thing, but in like a government, right? So every part of government, every part of our lives is divided up into different, drawers, and they run those different departments. So you've got a Department of Education, a Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture. We have a bunch. Department of Homeland Security, all the different pieces, right? And the president oversees all of them. So rather than the president having to be in charge of every single one, they put someone in charge of this one. Okay, great. Now you go do that and let me know if you need my help, right? So that's how a bureaucracy works. It comes up so many times in AP World because there are so many bureaucracies. It's a good thing because it is very efficient. It can be a bad thing if there is corruption or it's complicated and nothing can get done. All right, let's move on. From America to France. So one thing to note about the French Revolution, sometimes teachers spend a lot of time on the French Revolution, I think because for us, like it was part of what we learned the most, this and the American Revolution, right? And also it is a fascinating revolution, and Obviously, if you're taking Euro, you would spend a lot more time on it. But it's been taken out of AP World a lot more than it like used to, right? So it's really not, you don't need to know every single detail about the French Revolution. For your class, you might have a test coming up on the French Revolution, and that's fine. There's plenty to learn about it. It's important. It's, influential. But it's not necessarily going to be a huge part of your exam. So please keep that in mind before you start to memorize. There's like, if you look up like French Revolution Quizlet, you can find Quizlet decks with like 100+ terms. Don't spend your time memorizing all that. It's a huge waste of time. Okay, so French Revolution, why does it happen? Unfair tax, right? You've got the third estate not being taxed more than the first and the second estate. And of course, war debt, they're obviously involved in the French and Indian War. So because of war debts, they need to hike up the taxes. People get pissed when taxes are increased. You also have got social inequalities. You've got this first, second, and third estate where the third estate is poor, right? Honestly, this is so similar to like today. You've got the like 1%, you've got the 99%, it's almost even the same exact percentage points where you have this small group of people that have most of the wealth. And then the rest of the people are struggling. In some cases, they're starving or homeless or, physically don't have everything they need. And so this is a huge problem. People revolt. So if you're keeping track, this is a difference between France and America. In the American Revolution, it's the elites who revolt. In the French Revolution, it's the lower classes who revolt. Boom. And then, of course, a lack of representation, right? So same thing, the lower classes are not represented equally or fairly in government because the first and the second classes, estates, would gang up on them, right? Would align against them. All right, so some key events: tennis court oath, National Assembly, Declaration of Rights of Man is really similar to, that would be the like comparable document to the Declaration of Independence, right? So you have just this like statement of, there are rights that people deserve because they're people. And so that is revolutionary, right? This is all new stuff. Storming of the Bastille. What's crazy is that, here I am not putting this in my own slide. The Women's March on Versailles is one of the real catalysts of like the actual revolution. And it doesn't get a whole lot of attention. I've literally been like reading a book about how women's anger has sparked revolutions in world history. And that's just a perfect example of just like women leading. So shout out to the women. And then the French Revolution really devolves into this like reign of terror, right? So it just becomes like, pushing for things to be better, pushing to get out the corrupt, the greedy, to like rid the government of those people. And then the lines become pretty blurred, right? Of who should be executed and who shouldn't. And so a whole bunch of people are guillotined, heads just totally chopped off, until even by the end, the guy who started the whole guillotining himself, Robespierre, he gets his head cut off too. So literally the story of the French Revolution is everyone's fighting up for the, things to be better. And it just kind of devolves into this like complete chaos, very like obviously violent time. So good job, France. Some major players, you've got King Louis the 16th, long white hair, big palace, lots of money he's spending for no reason. You've got the three estates, right? So that first, second, third classes, you have 1%, 99%. The Jacobin Party, this would be the party of the radicals, the ones who are pushing for revolution and who continue to push for it. And they kind of keep pushing and pushing and pushing until until someone kind of turns around and says like, well, maybe they're the problem, right? They've gone too far, so let's rid us of radicals as well. Robespierre, right? So he's the one who's the leader of them, and gets his head chopped off too by the end. Everybody does. All right, a couple of impacts. Trying to like. Okay, so a couple of impacts is the rise of Napoleon. Napoleon kind of rises out of all of this with, whoops. I just like minimize the chat. So, Napoleon is able to take control of all of France because it's really kind of in disarray. And the Congress of Vienna, which will eventually form this like balance in Europe, which will last for most of the 19th century. And then, of course, constitutional monarchy. It kind of, by the beginning of the French Revolution to the end, it kind of ends in a similar way as they were. Like there isn't like too many massive changes to it. Like by the end, it's not like this. They don't establish a totally different government. It's kind of similar, although like there is a constitution involved now, but there's still a monarch for quite a bit, right? Of course, with like Napoleon. Okay, and then later on they'll establish more. Okay, but like I said, don't worry too much about like a ton of these things. Like you're not gonna get asked about like tiny details about the French Revolution. I mean, that's my guess. Okay. All right. Let me go through and see if there's any questions about America or France, but I'm not going to spend too much time on these questions. So, did the Reign of Terror include Napoleon? The Reign of Terror came before Napoleon. So Napoleon kind of swoops in the like chaos of the Reign of Terror and is able to take control after that. So is the French Revolution similar to the American Revolution? For sure, right? So tell me some things in the chat. In what ways were the revolutions in France and America similar? Right, so give me a couple of ways that you could argue that they were very similar, similar revolutions. Right, so thank you, Ashley. You've got the Enlightenment. Kenneth says French Revolution was inspired by the American Revolution. Yes, but that wouldn't be a similarity. That's just sort of like, kind of shows that they're related. Unfair taxes, a bunch of you guys are putting in there. Exactly, right? So taxes is a big one. War debt, it's the same war and the same debt that's causing both of them. Okay, so a couple of things that have been put in here that I want to clarify that are not similarities are the push for independence is not a similarity. Okay, so America did not start the revolution because they wanted their independence. And so and even in France was kind of already an independent nation, not colonized. So that was not a similarity. And then also the underrepresented class is good. Just make sure it's not, yeah, there we go. In one, it's the elites, one, it's not. All right, so what else we got? Social tensions, yep, unfair government. Good, so like there's a lot of reasons why it's similar. Now, give me some things in the chat of why they're different. What are a few reasons of why the French and the American Revolution were different? Guillotines, yeah, there were no guillotines that happened in America. The French were started by the lower classes, good, whereas the upper class was in America. Different groups of people, yes, so right, lower versus upper. The American Revolution could be argued to have succeeded, whereas the French Revolution could be argued to have failed. You could argue that for sure. The way the king ruled, French was definitely more violent, in that immediate aftermath. Purple. Let's see. Rise of Napoleon. Yeah, that would be a good one, right? So like if you think about the aftermath of it, in the end, the French have an emperor and the U.S. has a, federal democracy. So completely different ends to that. French fries. Yeah, the French people were hungry. The Americans weren't hungry. Not yet. All right, good. Okay. Wasn't the American Revolution technically not an actual revolution? I don't know. It depends on who you ask. I mean, it seems pretty revolutionary. And it's argued, I think you could argue either way. Reign of Terror is just like the process of, in France, those who were deemed as radical or in some way harmful to society were killed, right? So that starts as like beheading of, the king and the queen and the monarchs and all the people who were, seen as part of that like corrupt government. And then it sort of just kind of keeps going. And then eventually the people who started the Reign of Terror, they get Reign of Terror. All right. Okay, I'm going to answer that question in a second. Okay, can you talk about the Tea Party one more time, please? So the Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party is just, it's a form of protest, right? It's just protesting the taxes on tea. So throwing tea in the harbor, making a whole thing out of it, and blaming the Native Americans while doing so. All right, I'll go back on that one. Okay. In which ways did the French Revolution change social conception in Europe? It's a good question. What do you think? I mean, I think that the French Revolution does like force a lot of people to think about social inequalities. But I don't think that necessarily like sticks forever, right? Like there's still very much social inequality. And so I don't know how successful that part of it was, but it definitely does shift things, right? Okay. All right. Let's keep it going. Let's go to Haiti. Okay, the Haitian Revolution is honestly like one of my favorites. One of my favorite revolutions of all time. And I don't understand why there isn't a big motion picture about the Haitian Revolution, because it is fascinating and it should definitely get more screen time. Okay, so here's how the Haitian Revolution goes down. You have these Enlightenment thinkers coming out of France. You have the French Revolution itself, posing these, Declaration of Rights of Man. You have this movement of like, men have rights. And so in Haiti, as a French colony, there's a massive slave population, right? It's like majority slaves and a minority white, like French colonist population. And the slaves are like, wait a second. Our colonizers are saying that men have rights, right? That like that men should be free, that men should be, and I say men over and over again because women were not included in this conversation, right? So the idea is that there should be this freedom of speech, this freedom of happiness, right? That government should protect you. And so you're kind of like, but what about us, right? Like how hypocritical could this be? If France can have a whole revolution on this, then why can't Haiti, right? And the social and racial inequality is much more massive in Haiti because you have slavery at a massive scale. And so the divide is insane, right? Between the like upper class white colonists, slave owners, and the slaves themselves. So this whole movement is going to just be totally ignited by that. And so this is why you get a slave revolt. So, in all of history, there have been thousands and thousands of slave revolts. Don't for one second think that at any point slaves didn't revolt in a lot of ways. Sometimes they're violent, sometimes they're physical revolts, but slaves revolt in a lot of ways, okay? This is the most successful slave revolt that ever happened. And like I said, like why we don't learn more about this, I don't know. So some key events, you've got the Civil War. Civil War. Now I'm like, why is that listed there? Civil War in Haiti, I guess. Slave revolt, invasion of Napoleon. So what's going on is that the Haitian Revolution is happening towards the end of the French Revolution. And so now that Napoleon is coming to power, Napoleon is like, we got to stop what's going on in Haiti. We can't let them revolt. They're in fear for that, right? They don't want this to happen. So Napoleon is going to invade, but the Haitians run by Toussaint Louverture is able to hold him off, right? So that obviously is let's see, slavery was ended in the colony in 1793. Yes, of course. Yeah, so doesn't he end up killing some of the slaves? Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you've got this so Napoleon's trying to stop this revolution from happening because, one, Haiti is profitable for France. He wants to keep Haiti under control. And two, he doesn't want to just lose, it looks bad, right? He's trying to be this emperor, this strong, military general or, whatever. And he can't just lose to this, this so-called inferior black state. Right. So he's got to stop this. And instead he's really not able to. Right. It's kind of too far gone. And so a couple of major players, Boukman is the one that starts that initial slave revolt. Right. So you have these marooners, you have these smaller societies in Haiti of black slaves who either had been freed or had escaped. And so he is really leading that initial slave revolt, which is then taken over by Toussaint Louverture, who is very successful in holding Napoleon off. It's not until several years and a mostly successful revolution that he's tricked and captured and taken by the French, but not without leaving Haiti independent. And then, of course, Napoleon is part of it. And just 6 months later, after Louverture is captured, 6 months after that, Napoleon just kind of decides, I don't even want Haiti anymore. It's more work than it's worth. So frustrating, right? So after all of that, after trying to stop it, after trying to keep it under control, then you finally have this well, whatever. And so that's when, okay, they get their independence, but they're a couple of the impacts, they're independent, of course, right? So Haiti becomes, really the first, slave revolt, of course, to become an independent state, and potentially even the only. But there's at the cost of a complete destruction of their economy, and not by their fault, right? So because of the way they're sort of left, after that, in the aftermath of it, you don't get any sort of real support for Haiti. And so for decades and for, centuries, really, Haiti really struggles to put everything back together, because there's really just a lot of destruction that comes from it and not a lot of support that they had from others, and also they weren't brought into the global economy. It's they have this independence, but they're not given the same real global rights that the other states are. And the biggest thing is just anti-slavery movements, right? Moving from a world where slavery was just kind of accepted to people questioning, why are we doing this? Right. And I mean, it's all connected to the Enlightenment. It's all part of it. And even just some of the slave revolts that happen in America, right? In Nat Turner, some of these things that happen in the US from American slaves happen because they know what happened in Haiti. Nobody's living in isolation. I think that tends to be something that is forgotten. You know, like slaves in America, find out what happened in Haiti. The news travels. And I mean, just imagine, just think about it. Think, you know, if you're being a slave, I mean, there's so much here I can't imagine, but you find out what happened in Haiti. They revolted and they were successful. They did it. Why not do it here? Right? So there's plenty of attempts, and not just in America and other places in the world. Like, this all travels. Like, we're by period 5, everything is connected. Everything. Because of global economy, because of communication, transportation routes, everything is connected. Okay. So I think that's the last part. All right. So let's see if there's any questions about Haiti. All right. Some of these are... Yeah, so did the Haitian Revolution cause uprisings elsewhere? So if you're watching this on replay, just move back a little bit from this point. There are plenty of other slave revolts around the world that do happen because word travels about this. To what extent did voodoo play a role? So think of it less as voodoo and more as Vodun, right? So that Vodun would be the syncretic religion between West African, like, spiritualism and Christianity. And so that is taking hold in the Caribbean. And like Vodun, I think, has a large part in uniting the slaves, right? Like, in creating a culture that people are a part of. And so beyond that, like, I mean, I don't, yes, I'm sure. And I would need to, like, read up more about the Haitian Revolution, specifically the religious causes. This question, was Napoleon good or bad? Hit me in the chat of what you think. I mean, you could argue anyway, was Napoleon good or bad? It totally depends on who you are, right? Napoleon was good to some people and he was bad to others. I mean, he is, you know, obviously very important historically, and yeah, morally ambiguous is the best way to leave it. But you can argue either way. Okay, so last one, Latin American revolutions. All right, so I got a couple flags on here because it's important to remember that the Latin American revolutions are not one thing, right? We lump up a whole region into this last part. And so there are several that are going on, and I didn't even add all the flags, but we'll talk a little bit about Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Mexico, Ecuador, you know, pretty much the entire continent, except for Argentina and a couple others that were already independent. All right, so causes, social inequalities. Sounding familiar, right? So it's just social inequalities across the board. People are upset. They don't, you know, people want the best for themselves, for their family. And if they're not able to get that, then you have revolutions. You've also got a general removal of peninsulares. So remember that peninsulares are the people who were born in the Iberian Peninsula, like Spain or Portugal. So without them there's sort of like a vacuum of power that the Creoles will swarm into. Napoleon's invasion of Spain. The country that with the corner flag is Colombia. Napoleon's invasion of Spain. So, you know, the countries in Latin America are just like seeing an opportunity to leave. I think, you know, and I probably just by putting all of these in one slide, I think it makes it kind of confusing because they're all very similar, but I'm lumping a lot of things together. So I'll just kind of talk a little bit about a few of them, and not too much, but basically you've got peasant revolts that are happening in different places. Let's see, Creole revolts, Gran Colombia. Okay, let me just put all of these up. except for impacts. Talk about that later. All right, so Mexico, you have Miguel Hidalgo. He is trying to bring together the American Indians and the mestizos, which are mixed race, for like a revolutionary drive, but that revolution is failed. That's 1810, and in 1824, Mexico does finally become a republic. So, and then there's another revolution that happens later in Mexico in 1910. I think it was 1910, and so we'll talk about that one later. The one of the big people to know here is Simón Bolivar, because there are several countries that become independent because of him, like Bolivia and Colombia and Peru and Ecuador and Venezuela. Means a whole lot, right? So he basically conquers this massive territory. He sees himself as a very liberal leader. You know, he wants things to be different. He is a Creole, and so he does not want to be ruled by, you know, people who were born in another place. He feels that he has every right to have that power. And so all the area that he conquers is Gran Colombia, and it is after him is eventually split into these successor states, which then become all of those South American countries that I've been listing. In Brazil, it had an emperor that fled back to Portugal. And when he left, Dom Pedro I was in Brazil still. And as like a major like plot twist, instead of siding with the Portuguese in keeping control of things, as like people were starting to the same things were happening in Brazil, he sided with the revolutionaries. And so he declared independence from Portugal, set up a constitutional monarchy, and became the emperor of Brazil. All right, so a couple of impacts. Independence across the board from Spain, from Portugal. This is really the end of like the Spanish Empire, right? The Portuguese Empire is also very much in decline. You know, the British Empire will keep going, even though they lose America. They're still very much in power until World War II. But by this point, the Spanish and the Portuguese are really have lost a lot of their global power. You do have continued inequalities, right? Things are not perfect across the board in South America. You know, some of the things that they fought for, they got, and some of the things they didn't. And so, especially, again, who's left out, right? You have the Creoles who are fighting for power, but at the expense of mixed race, and especially slaves and natives, right? So slaves and natives are just totally left out. All right, I need to... One second. So, okay, and then Mexico becomes a federal democracy. Can you need my charger? My phone is gonna, my computer is gonna die. All right, so I guess we'll just kind of wrap it up soon. Okay, so at the same time in the world, you do have quite a demand for good. You have a demand for women's rights, right? All right, you guys, hang on one second. I gotta charge my computer. Hey. Okay. Take your time. All right, y'all. I made it. Whew. You know when that thing pops up and you're like, oh my God, I gotta charge this. Yes, happy Women's History Month. And yeah, I'm gonna take a second and talk about the demand for women's rights and the rise of feminism. So we've been talking all about all these revolutions, okay? You've got the American Revolution, the French, the Haitian, all the Latin American revolutions. We didn't even talk about some of the like revolts that happened in other places in China, in India. I didn't even bring them up. I really focused on Atlantic, which was probably we could have done more, but who's left out of all of those revolutions, every single one, is women. Women are not given a seat at the table for any one of those other revolutions. And so this is exactly why you have this like rising demand. It's the same thing, right? I don't even know how to say her name. Olympe de Gouges. So you have Mary Wollstonecraft, who is an Enlightenment thinker, who is incredibly brilliant in what she puts out there. And that, like, I'm going to read this quote, that if women be not prepared by education to become the companion of man, she will stop the progress of virtue. I mean, it's just like, she's just calling all of the like hypocrisy of, you know, how can you not educate women the same way that you educate men? How can we not have the same rights for women, right? She's calling on this. It's like, you know, it's hypocritical for like some of these other men to determine that other, you know, men get rights and not women. And then Olympe de Gouges, she's just like such a badass in this, because you have the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. And so she's just like, nah, that's not it, right? I'm going to also have a Declaration of Rights of Women, because they're different, right? And you can't have this entire declaration that gives men all these rights. Like, what about the women? So she writes this declaration for women's rights, and I can't be more clear on like how not okay this was at that time. You know, like for real, when you see the women in Congress right now, the way that they're treated when they call out for, you know, changes, when they try to make a stance, when they're saying things on Twitter, on Instagram, on national news, when they do any of these things and they get attacked super quick. I mean, think about what it was like in 1791 for her to do this. It was incredibly revolutionary, okay? And she paid the ultimate price for it. She was beheaded in the guillotines like all the others. But to read her quote, "Women are born and remain free and equal. All citizens, including women, are equally admissible to all public offices." If you read any document from this time period, honestly, read the Declaration of Rights of Women. It is so dope. It's pretty quick. It's cool to read. And it just is, again, it's just a stance against it. It's like, we can fight for all these rights. We can want a better life for France, but how can we do it if we don't include women in that conversation? How can you not include half of the population? And so these are two of the women that are doing that. But also, like, I just want to be clear too, there were plenty of women that were part of the Haitian Revolution, the Latin American Revolution. They were part of the American Revolution. You know, like, women were a part of all of these things, and you're not going to read about them in your textbook, and they're not going to be on the AP World exam. But these revolutions would not have happened in the same way without the allyship of women. And so, end rant. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to call out is Seneca Falls, is because, you know, feminism at this point in American history is like pretty fascinating. So, you know, they say at Seneca Falls, you have this meeting of activists, of feminists, right? Frederick Douglass is there. Susan B. Anthony is there, you know, and they're meeting in upstate New York. And the whole convention is about, you know, how do we bring women into the conversation? How do we have a society that is equal for both genders? So, but like, one of the like fascinating things about what happens in the feminist movement right around this time is a divide, because basically you get a split in terms of women who fight for the abolition of slavery in conjunction with fighting for women's rights, as like, if I'm going to fight for women's rights, I'm also going to fight for slave rights, because this is part of the same problem, versus another group who say, I'm not going to allow a Black man or woman to have rights before a white woman. Okay, so like this divide in feminism still exists in its own way. Okay, obviously we're not talking about slavery anymore, but this is a very prominent thing of our conversation even today, of just around, yeah. I'm gonna get off the pedestal a little bit. Anyways, demand for women's rights. Happy Women's History Month. The racists were basically European men. Basically. All right, y'all. So let's answer some questions. All right. So if you want to compare the American, French, and Haitian revolutions, you should, if you're rewatching this replay, tune it back to like when I talk about each one. We definitely talked a lot about how they are all very comparable. This was an LEQ question a couple years ago, so I don't see you guys getting this as like a straight up question on the exam. But plenty of similarities, plenty of differences among them. How do all the revolutions link together? So, remember, let's go back to this slide. Because like I said, when we first started, we thought about context, how do all the revolutions link together? They're all part of the same story, like what it looks like to live in a world with like forming the government around, rights for people, and the way that, we have news traveling so fast and we know what's going on in different places, women being in the workplace, then looking for more rights, like women started the labor movement. Looking at things like extreme wealth, things just keep getting worse and worse where people have a lot of money. And so how do all the revolutions link together? They're all part of the same push for just like a different way of doing things. And they all look a little different, but they really are all about just like, I don't know, breaking open some stuff. All right. Someone asked about the Russian Revolution. Russian Revolution is not in this time period. So Russian Revolution we'll talk about in period 6. So stay tuned for that in a couple of weeks. Oops. Here I'm like inviting you on screen. My bad. I don't even know if that worked. I didn't mean to do that. Revolutions of 1848 and its relevance for world history. To be honest, like I don't even know like a whole lot about the revolutions of 1848. I don't think that they're a big part of the AP World curriculum. It's pretty much just like a wave of like liberal movements. It's kind of like an aftermath of this. It's like, these revolutions last for, are only so effective, and then for the pieces that don't get, put back together, this is more about the revolutions of 1848 are about like extending the same ideas. All right, a lot of these I did answer. Let's see. Who are the mulattoes? Mulatto is the mixed race term for black and white. Whereas like mestizo is the mixed race term for native and white. Jamaica Letter was what Simón Bolivar wrote, that basically was like the equivalent to the Declaration of Independence. All right. I think All right, all the other ones I think I've answered. All right, y'all. So I'm going to leave it at that. I do actually want to show you. I actually want to give you guys a quick sneak peek into the new Fiveable. You guys want to see it? You guys want to see it? It's pretty dope. All right, I'm going to share my screen. All right, Dylan. Sneak peeks. So starting in a couple weeks, pretty soon actually, all of you will be able to log into the new Fiveable. It's not just for Plus, and you'll be able to watch some of the live streams in here, just in beta. But if you do have a Plus membership, then you'll be able to see all the replays like this. Total upgrade. Loving this. So that you can watch, you know, here's last week's imperialism with the summary all there and the timestamps where you can jump straight to it. Like, tell me about settler colonies, Amanda or Patrick. Oh, here we go. Pretty dope. And this is just like the first, you know, we're going to be in beta, you know, the rest of the school year. And so you guys are really going to help us build this. And that's what I'm just so excited for. So we're going to get a lot of feedback from you guys. We're going to build all kinds of features in that are going to even help you even more. We're going to do, let's see, you know, we're going to have quizzes, you know, so that you can take all kinds of trivia quizzes that are just straight up in here. Which of these were the invention of the Industrial Revolution? Steam engine, right? So this is going to be pretty dope. And I'm just really excited for you guys to be a part of the build of this. And so with that said, you know, like I said, when you're logged into Fiveable Plus, you got all the subjects. And so, and I talked about the like skills ones. Oh, you know what? I haven't added these yet. So we're still adding stuff. We're putting it all together. So this is really a sneak peek. It's not totally ready, but it's going to be ready. And is it an HTML5 video player? Nah. So love it. Love that you guys love this. So the app is gonna look awesome. I can't share my screen on here, so I can't. That is almost done. It's very similar to what's it called? It's very similar to this, but a little bit, you know, obviously different because it's on an app. But you'll be able to play all the quizzes on there. So like all the practice trivia questions are in here. We were starting to add them in, so you'll be able to like generate questions, which is going to be dope. And you can even filter it like, oh, I just want to play period 3 questions. There you go. And yeah, guys, I'm pretty stoked. So it's awesome. And we're going to send out some stuff this week about how you can help us beta test everything. And even get like a 1-week free trial to help us do it. So that, you know, if you're not a member, you can come in there and help us. And if you like it, you can stick around. And if you do have Fiveable Plus, then you'll be able to log in there, of course, and on your phone too. It's going to be so dope, you guys. I don't know if any of you guys were, I don't know if any of you were around last year, but you guys helping to build Fiveable has just been like super exciting to really just like, I don't know, I want to make this all easier for you. I want you to take as many APs as you can, and I want you to pass them and not be in as much student debt as I am, because I'm telling you, man, it's crazy. What is free? So every time we do something live, it is free. Okay. So if we're live streaming, if we're playing trivia, if we're, you know, anything else that we're doing live, it's free while we're live. You can come, but like as soon as the stream is over, we're going to be archiving it into the Plus area. And so like you guys just saw, you know, everything that is everything that we've ever done is being uploaded into that so that you can bounce around. And we're going to keep upgrading things to add, you know, all kinds of different features, like better search, ways to search things, better ways for you guys to interact with us, you know, doing more streams of writing practice essays, having students hosting more streams. We're even going to start creating like an interactive study guide so that you can like read a study guide and then sort of like put your mouse over certain words so that you can just quickly see like what the definition was, what you're supposed to know. It's going to be so dope. I'm telling you, it's going to be so dope. So if you're not yet a member, the link is right here. It says 31 plus AP World Stream replays. Over there, you can just see all the replays that we've done. And it's $25. It's $25 for the rest of the year. It's like literally one time. And you have every subject, every slide, everything. And every time we add something, you'll have that too. And just know that like you're supporting us, you know, we are working really hard to make this happen for you guys this year. And so, yes, it's $25 one time. So, you know, I understand that like it still costs something, but that's what we have to do. You know, like we're building all these things and we're spending every waking moment doing this. I was literally up until 6 a.m. last night doing this. So buying a Fiveable Plus membership is supporting these teachers. Okay. It's supporting every teacher that is up. You know, I'm here on Mondays and Mr. Lassiter comes, and on Tuesdays we have psychology and language. On Wednesdays we've got U.S. history and Euro and biology, and then on Thursdays human geography. And I want to be able to add more APs, but we're going to need more support from you guys. Become a member. Tell your friends to become a member. And that's what I'd love to be bringing more APs in. AP courses are not the exact same as college classes. You know, everything ends up being a little bit different. But it's all, if you're taking a class in like European history, like Tom Ritchie's sessions in Europe are going to help you out. And ultimately, you know, Fiveable started out as a platform for APs, and it will continue to be a platform for AP classes. But we want to go beyond that too. You know, like we just want to help you review after school. You know, it takes more than just what happens in the class period, right? Like are staying after school and coming in early or coming in during lunch, or they're not and you need them to be, you know, and I think like we can do better in supporting students. And so that's what we're going to do. And we're going to build as much as we can and all this content, and we're going to have you guys help us do everything. I want you to get all the college credit you can. So a couple new questions were posted in here. So I just want to how do I watch a video I missed in the past? So that's part of Fiveable Plus. That's what we're talking about. So you can watch any single replay that we've done. If you go to fiveable.me/plus and sign up, it's $25. Which, by the way, it's the price is like we're giving you a discount. It's actually $35 for Fiveable Plus. So some of you guys have come in earlier in the year and spent less. And if you came in last month, it was $20. And this month it's $25, but next month will be $30, right? And if you wait until May, it's $35. So yeah, so like it's $35 and we're just basically giving you discounts for if you sign up early. So you can watch all the videos inside Fiveable Plus. Are the slides for this session free? No, they're not. So the slides are uploaded right now in Fiveable Plus, and yeah, so you can like log in and see them there. I'm not gonna do a Kahoot tonight. So we've been just like working super fast to try to get the apps ready, the trivia apps ready, because everything is like done. It's just a matter of like uploading stuff. And so we'll have the app out on the App Store like within the next few weeks. And so we will, once we have that out, then we'll be doing trivia after every session, and it'll be free to do. So you'll be able to join it. So like if we were doing it tonight, then you'll be able to log in and do trivia between like 9 and 10 p.m. And there'll be questions on Atlantic revolutions that you can answer. That'll be super fun. Is Mr. Lassiter still in New York? I don't think it really actually snowed that much. So he's probably made it home at this point. Where is the money going to go? So the money is supporting all of the work that every single one of these teachers is doing. Fiveable, it's a business. So like we are working on creating a way for like students to do better. And so everything that we do costs money. And so the money goes to paying for those things and helping us create more things, think about something like Albert.io, like Quizlet, like Kahoot. All these things started somewhere, right? Like think about the other startups in your life that you use all the time. And so Fiveable is just the next one. And I want to, help me rule the world, you guys. Something like that. Google was a startup. I just saw a whole like ad about like UPS as a startup. Yeah, so like I'm doing the startup life now, all right, so I want to give you all a super shout out for hanging out with me tonight. I'm really proud of you guys for how much you are studying. Those of you that are coming through our live streams every week, highly recommend putting it on your calendar. Go through, if you on this Crowdcast thing, if you can click follow us on Crowdcast, you'll get notifications of when we're live too. It's just another way for you to remember, but make the time, come through. We're live. It's free to come live. You're here, and get in here while you can. Our live streams will be free until basically the week before the AP World exams. And then in that last week, we have 4 nights of cram sessions for Fiveable Plus members. So I'll be live basically every night that week, really like drilling all the last minute stuff. And so if you need one more reason why you should sign up, those last minute live streams, talk about make or break. Will any of the cram sessions be student hosted? Yeah, probably, Dylan. I think that the people have probably spoken and they like your live stream. So we'll find a way. Okay, so next week we have long distance migrations. The week after that, we're headed into Unit 6. I cannot wait for Unit 6. It's my favorite time period. So that's where we'll be. And I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. We'll have Mr. Lassiter next week. So drop me an emoji in the chat of just how you're feeling right now that it's the end of the live stream, and it'll just leave a bunch of emojis in the chat. Give me your little smiley faces or like, sleepy faces. I'm feeling really warm because I've literally had a heater on me this whole time. I wonder if that messed with the sound. I hope not. Maybe it did. I feel like it just got really quiet. All right, I'm out.